Same doc, right?
I believe that. So, we have. Oh, yeah. Congratulations on getting through a 4-year degree career. You have a lot to be proud of. I hope that you, I know that all of your hard work is paying off. And I really hope that you're proud of yourself because you deserve it.
Thank you.
Of course. We don't have to. I'm good with it.
Seller colonial book on dialogue violence to genocide or racial seller posted onto internet to maintain their structural dominance. Charges that indigenous recognition proves the struggle and confidence propose a foundational breaking seller colonial society. Coulthard 14 legal recognition making will occurring damage indicated by the state's master deadline pro. The aggression to the crossing from the unabandoned colonial situation colonial no struggle the freedom action to constitutional amendment or to cut itself in the form of political right without conflict. And people struggle conflict recover the colonial process struggle. Being forced to colonize the colonial and recognition cover without there's some restoration our when fighting chaplain foundational break the structure of colonial power. Special hope that what liberty recognition within the possession of those empowered to remain structurally limited to equal dependency or brutal one that apply to purchasing mutual dependency rather than colonial match difference of colonial natural left of states and strong recognition. We're domination between more nations of states incorporated with an interest traditional boundary. No mutual dependency and national recognition of the land, labor, and resources living relation. Undisturbed, the process of extra legal education occurs through the legal extension, sovereignty, and nationalized and living international law demands delegation of indigenous governance for mapping the world fair seller treaty provision Irani 24. Who's welcome Rocky increasing purpose celebrated US nation characters rating possibly legal products because it's a lot of indigenous ones alternative backing the territory costs on the search of history backing on account of the US territory divided and racial without consent difference. I think the US authority cast as legal percent of land generating authority of course different geography since it's a land communication structure. Reality of shared association share waterways with each of the law enforcement understand territory jurisdictional brief vessel. First out of territory by law participation consider shipler. These are soldiers rights and conservation authority territorial laws of war with the consent policy making legal solution relies on the assumption of seller section as the only valid form of sovereignty European 13 legal mapping predicate on line consensus seven sovereignty that eliminated policy making assertion of the collective leads the authority to realize the regular outline and derived appropriation to territory and technology of justifying jurisdiction made but only on concluding it happens the legal template and the extra political place and personal companies that increase extra legal economic consistent to issues from contractual equity for total nation state elements of common sense and normalized set policy foundation is background test that legal writing virtual traditionally rather function at each of the stage Liberation from criminal state tax by bringing up set frames so state price fixed points through the wood recognize the possible indigenous landscape by the trade data and function as unreal. The subject and contractual relation is both on civil study, natural as a dominant conception of state code, rationality, and politics, and people are raised to be cast the cost of the state instead of an independent entity, goes through assumptions that encompasses the construction of the life and governance king. 17. In our indigenous philosophy and marginalizing our domestic foreign policy and our big self-includes as well as self-includes to find the limits of what is possible foreign policy and between indigenous people and non-indigenous will continue because the complementary policy instead of undergoing the institutional sellers and indigenous dollars that are sent them in to form self-balance self-money of this it's been part of the foreign policy and crafted around what religion political international tradition presentability natural persistent as the amicable environment state compete against each other about the community number of states iron casting indigenous people are permitted to use that the land and fork responsibility and political communities, specifically treaty making countries and saying on the eliminatory logic and self-movement. This discharge the function of treaties is to maintain solid sovereignty over native life and land while maintaining a facet of legality starts in 18. Considering the vehicle national goals to the US around the US legitimizing expand the base limited logical principle in the United States requires sovereignty. This constitutes the treaty extended the legality treaty apart from the one treaty settled between the laws US with control the possession of legality and right of the the boundary. As a law settled logic operates to settle sovereignty, strictly even employing movable as settled sovereignty, increases material with settled the right criminal empire. The expansion was to alienate sovereignty is the model settled paternalism requires recognition of the mental life separates grounds from which I see emerged Maria 19. As being called in virtue of power less for the proposals power less relation to UNC something to approach I culture no large crimes control with the I love shape those rooted in masculine internalized idea Western nation whatever nation is born to continue the economic political control strategy as a fundamental colonialist society. But yes, will never shut the edge of the US localized sea in Africa said I do this in the court. I feel like created for recognition and legitimacy is civilized and cool accelerate route to innocence. The massive backplay. The seven of course like uncles and Rome statue. But that's really innocent people in the states violent Simpson that drew by saying the land virtue force to the country of lofty agent criminal institution recognition to be to offer fairness or technical representation authorities, but political, I think authorities are marching about West Indian political action, whose consent, the political movement against the presidential freedoms, the loop based like the movement against the stories are what is those are ultimately but specific class that post ethics and truth the current notion that people consent with us saying again, so from that's way from refuse of recognition, solicited local power instead of turning away from actual self-determination, time instead of the secretary about policy recognition, to refuse the diversity that gives someone election, did you listen to recognition, reforms that say the illegitimate job with the struggle inclusion, this question of regime itself and refusal of full quality generated an option to the recognition and try to celebrate recovery if you minute about thought freedom self freedom to the training with recognition celebrating primary was the power of freedom self power this party continues to recognition alternate and business society want to get our the role ballot is to disrupt the society of society so much sellers the economy refuse colonial subject speaks English shape or city Henderson 70 states and the study corporate intellectual differences or sexual modification behavior no according to force from the laws that other protecting things are and not be colonial required partiality because the final national scholar embrace it and people could just understand study to have work in the rationality curve which is interested take component finding such as social relations logical or everyday life subject divisions to live in the generic condition possibility of specific visible when sovereignty asking appearance a lot unreadable what they are considered so limits to the daily life to predicate on genocide to blood the teller psyche pretty much relation to someone who seller and possible teller person let's get to defense posture the response to the bringing that 10% to the city on covert to information reality communication found in unredeemable suffering so therefore always disclosure of every celebrity can be suffered national part of collecting or situation of practice and given so it's the next part undermining the rules make them more effective Alberti 21 during the basis of the data less problem that change found that book critical games over running challenge purposes and undermining properly for the pursuit of the game challenge purposes those for you can have a single game series make them more effective at each continue game use your overcrafted volunteer sign when you choose and assign custom martial projects so that not pretty just death and roasting multiple zero variants multiple rest when you start to sell and produce knowledge set of global on based ways of knowing goals names set of future quantity that's my project refuse all horizontal destroys the moon for contingency marked by 20 for the move cut build by so most of the left concern not only for that hierarchical division and one within the community discord all pilots and field capital operation and understand that dynamics cannot be produced in one directional there's not the prioritize better taking all linear movement professional organizing but between board part organizing minor thing that's it just you didn't bring the part
So what?
Yeah.
Ross.
Mhm.
Any independent reasons to vote after you vote?
not as far as the one they see
Like, are there, did you read anything that was not in the one AC document?
but no
But, the critique of the ICC, the critique seems to be that the ICC mostly prosecutes Africa. Did the genocidal dictators that the ICC prosecuted deserve to be prosecuted?
well, they do, but our argument is that ICC, like the judge in the ICC are like Western tribunals that includes the third world countries to decide who
Okay,
judges
so-
should not be
So
prosecuted.
so actually people in Africa requested that crimes committed in Africa be brought.
Sure,
closer
the
to
argument is
the-
that the ICC is founded upon colonial institutions like the UNSC.
Okay, so if like historically colonized like territory in Africa or something, if an African person requests that the ICC step in to prosecute someone who attacked their family, do you approve that?
Yes, the argument is that the ICC should not be the one to decide who to prosecute because that is Western colonialism.
ICC
Instead, we should have the indigenous governance that prosecute like alternative this would
Do you
look
give
like.
up indigenous governance?
Well, that's an extension of our method. We believe that indigenous people should refuse the state in favor of some alternative liberatory struggles that sort of creates the structure that resists violence.
Okay, so
itself.
now there's just a new group of people in charge of deciding whatever an officer does. Is your argument that?
Wrong.
all
Argument
language-
is that we should like there shouldn't be an institution of Western paternalism that decides who
Wait,
who
so
to
do
and
you
to
or do
not
you not
prosecute.
defend a new council made up of indigenous people?
Well, it's what the method could look like, but we don't
Okay.
defend this.
Cool, the ICC, the reason why it's made up of Western governments is because they often have more capability for prosecutorial structures, i.e. Africa often doesn't have the infrastructure to complete that. How do indigenous groups somehow have the capacity to get this done?
Well, the assumption that indigenous groups have capacity to do so is violent because it assumes that indigenous people can never be literary.
No, it doesn't, it's a statement about the squad,
Okay, so the action is the scope.
what do you feel?
We feel
All you
our
said.
method, a refusal of recognition of
So
some
a
state.
refusal somehow empowers indigenous people?
It overthrows the state.
Wait, you don't feel an overthrow of the state then, so a
The
logical
method
process.
would look like indigenous people creating alternative
Okay,
communities that
pause,
refuse
I have
the
a
state.
question, how does refusing to engage with the topic lead to an overthrow of the state? Lots of people have done this.
Well, we
before,
don't like refusing the topic is not part of our advocacy. Our advocacy is refusing to recognize the state, which is itself overthrow the state according to
Okay, so
our
you
method
overthrew
evidence.
the state, good for you, how did that make any material change or help anyone in the United States? Or any?
We read, well, it solved settler violence because it overthrew the state, which is the root
So
cause.
any settler violence, nothing in the material world has
Wait,
changed.
Nothing in the, so you're asking me how my speech happened in this debate round?
Yes, how does it have any
Sure,
material?
Henderson says that repetition of settler knowledge itself refutes settlerism in debate right
Okay,
here.
stop, okay.
Valid
let's talk about
disrupt this.
Henderson later. Moving on. Horizontalism just refers to movements without leadership hierarchy, what's the implication of that?
Any movement that seeks to deny contingency itself fractures organizing, which impact turns those movements.
Also the number two case. Featured order when the ballot act was dependent tropical plan, United States means power government, all private entities, including attending for reading the European nation, free power government, the dictionary consistent with its given term, only depend the term used does not include private entities and becoming party to a treaty requires action by the Senate, US no date to be party to the treaty, state plus express with concrete act willingness to be bound and violation of the defense state action ratification, you close hand with the ICC that was crossed, and to impact water clash in front of undefinable and uncontestable moral truths without constraints on discussion which precludes the ability to get that with the prerequisite debate which is intrinsic goods and for for the purpose of debating definition of debate clash you choose or valid for certain since we also know we can expect to hear that clash as meaning to iterative argument testing the ability to subject controversial ideas where your sense of lack for debaters better need to research process discern what arguments are most accurate when refined or own beliefs to become more compelling evidence not reading plan loss of constitute new content of but never reaches high levels of contestation now fairness not reading a topical plan instantly express the pepper and the night unpredictably instructs us of all our neck ground debate is the game both sides of fairness make the game function improves model to understand why their impacts like suffering and colonialism have any basis in morality so only impact this ballot can solve because the ballot only designates who played the game best and intrinsically proven by their behavior and around abiding by speech times etc now for procedural impacts for lens optimization we don't need to win they make the game impossible just relatively less effective non-USFG aspect it firms first and last each and lack of stable topical advocacy prevents any basis for protection which makes negative engagement impossible incentivizes one our shiftiness now they have no offense one UT impacts as a process not products any education impacts about the content being important or solved by reading both filter impacts and what's unique across the debating two they get to read on the neg their case being topical truths which that debate definitely solves we access their education forces the application to better arguments three the TDA solves is allowed discussion the after form allows us to have nuanced responses turn nuanced responses ratification of here's a TDA ratification of boosts indigenous sovereignty homocy 1116 for the indigenous revenue of people high sea planning for rural no housing industrial commercial shipping inclusion packaging threat and values and livelihoods of indigenous people safe for waters and neutral countries benefit equally government plus ratifying equals and ratifying the ICC and able to advance the potential of international criminal law eliminating selectivity rails 16 ratifying selectivity by the ICC meaningful transformation given the investigation price committed by the global movement although continuing to Eurocentric laws international criminal law those are for domestic environment of contemporary criminal practice and forcible population transfer of apartheid no crimes against humanity under the Rome Statute and the ICC is not colonialistic rightfully prosecute individuals in the African Union have learned its influence and no manufacturer and see it's just an argument for the apple idea, which is what every negative position says to you, we're not imposing a norm or forcing you to do anything. Our norm is open to contestation because you can win a counter term and procedural fairness based game. Both sides depend on fairness based the game function. It proves a model for understanding why actually that was above. And second. Powers of binary relationship between exploiter and exploited construction at the point of production, the absence of politics of resignification that includes the division of labor to politics, the one you seek includes political politics, excuse, organizing a broad base of constituents to make demands in order to transform power relations, critique as market product, voting out materially powers, capitalist elites and dilutes, revolutionary energy, full and 24 discourse, accused ideology, implicitly incentive, and facts, critique, missing the natural conquer by oppression, for the right answer, so number of revolutionary providing for the people of the message implies overrunning content of this others debate are positive over balance of word things slash prolific critique, it's way to work rather than alignment or waiting leads to counter critique percent. President's nonsensical ideology said for critical truths, discourse reduces meaning through smoke screen celebrates discourse of marginal figure figure voice only those who can well that is critical narrative critical operation that is the products of critical different function independently that the market expertise exists independently but critical society to continue to dominate to feel like a brand and voting out protects the single lock of popular insurgency through performance of radicalism accelerating neoliberalism by carving out rhetorical spaces for resistance without any program to enact change ever 95. This theory of powers appealing uses and provides an analytic in which you do not have to confront the global relations about how the consequences of exploitation, resignification, refiners of class and reversible matters of discourse in which exploiter and exploited become shifting positions, open resignification through the plain invention of discourse of subject mass and power in which is control about any connection to the position of subject and social vision labor in the analytic to sort of relation production, class relation for references and powers always contract the point of production relation. Exploiter and exploited resolution is often through the resignification for revolution, factors, transformation, exploitation, and capitalism, cause mass inequality, social devastation, concrete realities need a material focused strategy from rhetorical capitalism, greater world increase in divided world social discrimination, reason rises in equality, half the world population load on half less than $2 a day. Realities require vigorous class analysis and unrelenting critique of capitalism, retargeting capitalist universality rather than decentering and discrediting class analysis. Educators must continue to engage Marx and the alternatives to reject the affirmative in favor of an unflinching commitment to democratic socialism. Role the judge, questioning capitalism, your ideologically preconditioned to prioritize neoliberal values. Tackling anti-democratic socialism requires institution allows to shape, cultivate, transform movements, living about valuation at the level of value, allows increasing freedom and decreasing assessing means of production, collective learning, have been used for profit, long means profit. Directionary use are property used for profit, wealth is the exploitation of living labor, reducing decide through democratic process how what we produce based on releasing needs and capitalism, collective self-determination, dominant democratic persons generate profit despite exploitation, unemployment, overproduction. We see ourselves as self-interested, sharing social information according to disability, each according to needs, sharing socially national labor time, also reducing it through innovation, knowing force participation will be intrinsically motivated towards protection for the common good and our own freedom framing. Role of the ballot is to vote for the better debater groups that really the policy action about the consequences of plan allows us to determine the practical impact of policy produced and preserves predictability that fosters engagement and negative on presumption. They provided no explanation of how much their advocacy is enough to solve, and it doesn't because they've read it before. Resisting iron doesn't do anything material trades off, but actual movements to recreate the average power deciding for resistance have subset of factor retreat from moral high ground thumbs change and your show debate doesn't change anything. People read after years, there's no material change, either that they defend the OSFG, in which case they can't solve the 1AC moves against the government, or they don't and they violate now their all or nothing framing reifies the power set that and shuts out all solvency, Busbridge 18. The structural paradigm goes down the social movement transformation, which achieves organization is fire for tendency, the only solution is decolonizing compulsive awful set the within and implementation and only push back does not offer the hopeful vision of liberated future apology related to agency for the politics on that. Normalizing logic not only deals to loss public and strategic alliances, harms resistance and acquiescence, the problem line the structure only from safety and opposition is not decolonization and rejecting IR scholarships and practice creates openings for far right option. There's no single disciplinary impulse within IR. Michelson 21 in terms of this and in relation to IR system creates conviction for being any here problematic idea for being necessitates moving beyond IR to become a short clinic. Critical IR become positive versus being exposed to insufficiently pure modern racist colonial critique take form of testing where scholars are reading the criteria they ignores the manner in which there is far from tending to alliances or set contrary to the purpose of the vision of the world. As scholars moving beyond IR could be just as problematic and temporary movements for our resources think against global order incorporating state political populist for Republicans race realist Russian chauvinist and white. I have the card there, and they definitely have not solved. They have not. They've critiqued IR. They've not critiqued being close to man. Up in the 1AC, it's not there now. And no reps on that. 100% of reps on sake of shape reality. 14 representation don't automatically lead to part of the response. No causal relation between the image and political and information within these events not on images. But on any Socratic predisposition values causal theory misconceived of how the visual recast the political realm itself. And even if they do, they cannot shape our subjectivities. This unique debate. It was 20 arguments are not effective. Change by real life. Police local waiters try to the argumentation. Spend editing, traveling, closer to the truth. Skip King Albury is in the context of questioning the constitutional convention does not make any critical claim. The debate is different because there's an assigned winner. Critical deliberation about allows evaluation of which policies are better. We'll insert yellow and Berenstein one no different meanings of fairness. The government wrong. This is about how people believe on people in stolen land claim it's fair because they took it. It's not about fairness and a game of winner and loser that's evaluated by the judge to the TVA solves better. You can apply this on T overhauls the assumption that this quote is always good now. The no skill stuff wrong. This is rant by culture debate from 2013 termed by our framework offense that their vitality is an answer to extinction trade-offs. It is completely irrelevant in the context of our negative arguments, and the Henderson card is just not about debate.
I guess. The first like argument on the cap K, critique is a market product, is a negative reading critique.
But
Are you reading a critique of capitalism?
the bowling card is a critique of discourse-based ideology.
The negative,
It says that critique alone is not enough, that is your affirmative, the negative has positive, that there is an alternative solution that solves better, that is the difference between our
Like-
material solution and your critique of language, ideology, and a utter rejection of any possible routes towards progress. The bowling card is like in reference to a critique that assumes potential to conjure away oppression, i.e. your explanation of your app and cross.
okay, so the negative, so voting negative, wait, so how do you solve capitalism?
Yeah, through the alternative, we imagine, an alternative in which we have democratically shared means of production, collective self-determination.
So you imagine alternatives through discourse that removes capitalism, isn't this the same?
Not at all, you're not understanding the Boland evidence, it talks about focus on words rather than focus on content. The argument in the one AC is that we should reject anything that is tainted by settler-colonial ideology, the Boland card says that precludes any hope for progress ever, because we'll be so focused on the purity and like.
You point to me a line in this evidence, this doesn't seem to be about epistemic purity, it's just about how critiques are commodified by
No,
capitalism.
it's the Boland and Ever evidence both says this, one is that. The Boland card says, quote, if heard and recognized by a sufficient number, words are revolutionary, that is the argument it's critiquing, is the idea that. If words are heard by enough people, it makes a change. The other argument, it also says that critique gives way to recoil rather than enlightenment or awakening and entrenches certain ideas. The Ever card says that resignification turns binaries of class into reversible matters of discourse in which exploiter and exploited become shifting positions open to resignification. It also says that the social relations, the production class relations are covered up when we focus on language and ideology. And we
So which part of the app focused on language and?
you said you would not defend IR in any context, notably, you did not say anything that's bad about ratification of Unicode. You just said
We
that's
said-
part of IR, we can't do
We said
that.
it in the post and nice to see our bad.
No, you don't actually say Unicode is bad.
Okay, why did we not say that? Can you tell me why?
There's not a single line in your one AC where you critique the policy action of Unicode. And notably, your app does not propose a policy alternative. It says we should reject things tainted
Wait, so
by.
we must engage in the policy of alternative.
Yeah,
like-
you need to give us a material policy of
Okay, is
alternative.
the alternative the policy alternative?
What?
Is the alternative the policy?
The alternative,
So
Yeah.
democratic socialism is policy?
Yeah.
What policy do you pass?
the United States dismantles.
Okay, this seems, wait, can you put it like,
Okay,
okay, something that says we are using the state, it says institutions, this is the state.
It literally explains that we would restructure the state so that everyone can share like resources according to their needs, sharing socially necessary labor time, reducing it through innovation, no one is forced to participate. Also, if you're mixing up policy and material, it's not about passing one simple policy, it's about making a material change. That is the distinction that the Ever and the Boland card make between the affirmative and the alternative. One is material, one is not. It does not need to be one set policy. It needs to imagine a material way in which we can enact concrete change. It's really different than the ones.
324 taken, order is case. Yeah, possibly. Case, the cap cake, and the top calorie. Let me know whatever. Second. Analytics also in there. The United States relies on policy recognition that incorporate natives in legal jurisdiction, providing them with political right, entrenching of relations, paternalism between the devil seller, and they committed that entrenches the genocide. Thus, we affirm a refusal recognition that opens up space for autonomous zones of indigenous that creates new movement outside the confines of the state. Rules valid to the settler psyche. In that way, if you don't have the jurisdiction to refuse on zones that's partisan, affirming or that's Henderson, affirming speech like unity, solve great extra settler repetition of settlerism. Debate is not neutral, overcommitted by settler colonialism, and turning in that politics, ignore short condition of exclude native now reject consumption, and that causes bonds. One is wrong, absolute sensitivity. One, we don't have to explain how our movement solves. Henderson is extraordinary power. Advocacy too, we do have material change because we have affirmed the method. No average charges have because we are open to practice testing and affirm other methods against other colonialism. Empiric disastrous arguments and multiple level meta are no longer right because the terms also people remove automatic from one target and stop and gender people innovate with first deterrence of value debate. Now we don't defend the same way answer this argument now. Buzzbridge is wrong. We're not the equalization but the practice resistance outside to say that answers Buzzbridge. We also assume contingency. And there is the index of wolf, which not our argument. Our argument is about dialectic itself is structured native existence, which is answers the argument about white ontology is bad. Now we don't reject IR to reform it. It's not being exclusionary. That is no settled violence. Now into the level of proper referential reality, recommend not read referential reality starting about policy making, which is not the status quo because about changing people's mind. Novus assumes echo chamber, which is exactly what their argument is about. Valid distrust the echo chamber, which is their argument. Now, King will not read this argument already applies to every form of rules, which answers his argument about games. Fairness, it's not about fairness, rather about credibility, we answer later. Capital is depend on settler accumulation without the asphalt cannot solve this argument when capital is transferable from the settler components to condition possible to capital cycle not. This way digitally from selling the elimination of this benefit to capital and land away and colonial release found upon sellers exist making self colonial release precondition for functioning of the capital work early. Both understanding with seller logical land appropriation firmly both all better shows or cannot open the links to that scope. Rejection of horizontal turns all their primary difference and lies injection motor pressure while ignoring possible failure. As Marlborough, the all fails Andrews 19. Some of these conditions of the shades of love the limitation of parties liberation meaning less something nothing. If you have the last level of the territory the work of states on bridge some known as void evidence not sure which states on final say right. Arguments the worst case that can take what Judas or less the economic reservations of the capital some resource will be that's all they cannot get with the link term part dialogue reading of theirs it's cannot account for genocide not motivated profit but logical relation to state the India to kill the man ideology killing Indian to save the man, ideology that continue to permeate the nation, national, but then creating a market for products linked to them as well. But Henderson proves that we still over to change the market. They're assuming personal narrative, but we endorse the revolution movement. There's also not about proving material condition, but we defend an advocacy. Aber is about Foucault, and a fighter classic, which we have impact terms. There's also no war about taking law for popular legitimacy. That's not ideal liberals, but Henderson proves that we can spill over. And so, now, fighter thinking leader, movement, pressure, organizing against violence, Marlborough 20, providing avoidance, separating thinking, martialized, going into word, failures to on the ground political way of being, versus portrayed for world and democratic revolution politics. If we don't protect IC, but we create links alternative representative objects and then mainly harder than the alternative about philosophy. The other out. Hold the line. The one is not read internally with clash of parents. They have just listen and pass your flow. If you don't have it, strike it. Don't tune our answer or tune our tone because what you are is only pyramid. Now, access that way because you don't have to be here to debate which is a pure because the friendship class. Now, counter to the next not counter to the app class. So and next is to the app class level 12 negative competition. When we watch your version negative for the firm rational core. It's a rejection of resolution looking affirmative ground limited skills with something that's just an interest of revolution that branch negative. And again, point to resolution to have the standpoint negative. You're from the defending revolution fundamentally disagree increase option increase that education. But it's from the personality capable of policy ability of critical. Meaning results to reduce by now dictionary 11 reduce by now the kind of predictability first of all good and all definition with case rejection setting one use such as the chapter 3 portion natives under your generation with them as a facet of the state eliminate ability to break away fascinated land permitted eliminating their 86 games 2 common sense is that these knowledge has the only legitimate starting point for legal action through casting to acting as the agent of the state actively provides legitimacy to facilitate and justice system version 3 connotes the knowledge that the idea Western legal to operate corrupt to violent it's found that traditional indigenous concepts in language and research includes storytelling spiritual beliefs not a reason for legal action so it's only predictable to them to cover predictability that's very exciting now we saw black and social policy bill case that are celebrating your model recently impacted your class because it did produce bad class. Testing the same class, so but we have an absence of Quincy Apple. Cafe proves engagement. Fairness is some as fairness not fair. Also, we rely on some rules, but change back ones. In terms of limits, which is Alberti now, abusive beyond is good because imagining in here, see will explode it out here. TBH not so because it still burns the state and unclosed much immigration in some ways, but it's not a student community.
4 minutes.
But it was a sit down though. Okay, but yeah, it's the same.
Yes, if we flow the subjectivity stuff on Tuesday, that will be after Tuesday, but I would be very.
Okay, so it's T case,
Case, KT case,
so cap K, T case.
or actually, just. He has a prior question, you're voting negative to preserve the game of debate, the 1 hour was too light on this, it's game over, we all came here to win, which means the ballot only serves to designate who played best within the confines of the game, while the app may be correct about the state of debate, voting out does nothing to resolve these issues, which means use the defaults, the model we all agree upon, prior to this tournament starting now, you should frame the debate through what you actually flowed in the 1 hour was unflowable, which means you should hold the line on new 2 hour extrapolation if you did not understand the argument, or your understanding changed, then it was not in the same argument to begin with. Now, remember, we're not a limitation on the content of debate, there's not on the content, just on the content that should be tied to a ballot. You are welcome to read this as a speech in the 1AC, but the ballot only has symbolic value insofar as we recognize that debate is a game. That is the only thing that makes the speech distinct from a podcast. Voting out for neg is only an indication of who played the game better. If they didn't play within its constraints, that must be the negative. Now, we don't have to win, then they collapse the game just that they make it structurally harder to be neg. They've not made any reasonability claims, which means it's going to be game over. The value of debate comes from the process of hashing and rehashing out debate. Now, I'll answer debate shapes subjectivity's offense here. The only thing they had on this was that it assumes that our evidence assumes echo chambers. Wrong. Our evidence assumes discourse and concludes that in the context of argument, advocating for one side just leads to an echo chamber absent deliberation, which means without being open to contestation, they cannot solve any of their offense. That was the Novus and Shim evidence. Their cards are not in the context of debate, they're in the context of deliberation writ large, which can happen to be of podcast, speeches, educational forms, but not in a context in which the ballot is tied to the resolution, which means it is game over now. That you should prefer our interpretation that the ballot must be tied to the hypothetical enactment of the plan. There are 2 impacts. 1 is clash. It was conceded. We all join and stay in debate for different reasons, competition, research, etc. We need to receive the only reason we receive these benefits is the back and forth that happens when there's a stable point of contestation in this debate. They said we did not read internal links. I absolutely did. That was in the 1C, and I'll repeat them here. Think of this impact. And I just repeated them above, and I'll repeat them on fairness. Think of this impact less as fairness and more as autonomy, because the lack of clash limits our individual ability to get what we want out of the activity. Now, with the limits offense, we have to prep every single possible ideology that is not tied to the topic, which means you know that the app interp means limits explosion. B is ground. We cannot read any more negative positions. Their interp certainly does not let us have debates or prepare counterclaims. In the ideal world of their interpretation, they are reading an app that is literally impossible to respond to because it is a moral truism. That was an argument that was conceded coming out of 1CC is predictability. Even if their interp doesn't allow many chaos and we have ground, we still are predictable. The resolution is a key stasis point, essentially voted upon and widely publicized. Now flashes external and straight turns the app. It breaks down dogma, makes us more ethical and is necessary to whatever broader purpose debate might serve. Now, iterative argument testing that was missing. Conceded rigorous thinking requires openness to the contestation of ideas. Otherwise, the impact of their app is thumped. We're just embracing the logic that there's only one right way to think about things, which is exactly how concepts like Nazism occur. Now, the value of topical apps that they're built to generate controversy, which forces debaters to refine arguments into their best forms. No one thinks that the 1AC is reading what they think is 100% morally right, or you shouldn't be reading it in a space where your opponent is forced to research and disagree with you and come up with a way to disagree with you. Now, our interpretation solved their offense. 2 arguments they conceded make it game over. 1 is switch side debate. When we debate K on the app, we've specified legal reform to defend, whereas when they are out, they can permute literally anything because they aren't tethered to any specific policies. Being able to apply strategies to contingent legal solutions makes us more effective advocates. 2 is the TVA drops. They read their only answers over time. Ratifying UCLOS is materially good for Indigenous sovereignty. That is outweighs on specificity. They read arguments that IR is settler colonial, but we have read arguments that we can use IR in a way to help Indigenous sovereignty. The ratification of UCLOS was the only mention of UCLOS in this entire debate that solves. It proves that using the state for specific actions can be good, and proves that there are ways to link discussions they want to have to the topic. Our argument isn't that it has to be the perfect app. The topic excludes us from having a perfect app as well, and you shouldn't have a perfect argument in a debate round. You should have that as a podcast or a very great op-ed. Now the rest of the line by line, they say we don't have an internal link that was answered and extended above. Now the neg stuff. 1, it links to all our offense. It's unpredictable. The topic committees release a topic in tab room. Assign sides on the pairing. You don't just get to pick new sides. 2 is neg is not debate. It's an agreement that links to all our offense and moves app solvency. 3 is disallows defense of the affirmative side, which is good per the TVA. Now the we need no. It's like the 16th definition. They definitely can't solve our predictability of offense. No analysis without a topical advocacy, and they violate on literally every other definition. They do not defend state action. They cannot have it both ways. Debate subjectivity, shape subjectivities was answered above, but I'll answer their only other offense here. First, the Eurocentrality stuff. This was truly unflowable. Hold them to what's now allowed in the doc, but also concession of the TVA takes this out. Not all treaties are bad, nor Eurocentric, and UCLOS certainly is not. If I proposed a treaty that was used through IR that said that we should give all land back to Indigenous people, you not call that colonial, which is proof that their broad sweeping critiques of IR are bad, and you should prefer specificity. Now the common sense dissat is wrong to critique of the state. It does not legitimize it, and you get P's on the neg, which solves all of your offense. A, because you've conceded it, and B, because then it's space and deliberation when we're able to actually critically evaluate things. Now, epistemology, your definitions are Western too. You literally read it from the same dictionary as me. It's about predictability, which is a prior question. If their definition is even marginally less predictable, you know, then it doesn't outweigh. Now, KVK does not solve clash. KVK debates are bad. They pit social movements against each other and make reform toxic. I have also answered it above in the overview too. They result in each team trying to out-explain each other's theory of power rather than getting to the specifics of structural problems, i.e. what happened to us on K debate. Third is KVK debates become abstracted from concrete solutions. The revolution isn't going to be for a while, but we're able learning how militarism is flawed in the present state of things and develop nuanced, exportable solutions to youth close and treaty law and things that are happening right now. Now they do not read any defense to the fairness stuff, which means that, you know, it comes first. It's procedural. They were unfair in this round, so you should vote against them. The possibility of other cheating things in the round are totally irrelevant. Theory beats cheating, process, counterplans, etc., which means there will be no defense to fairness in the 2AR, but no matter what, it would be new. Now the utopian fiat thing is irrelevant. They do not defend fiat at all. You should hold them to cross, in which they said they do not fiat any action. Everything is just a logical consequence of their method, which was just projection and did not entail any state action, which means they don't get any offense off of this. And if they believe that utopian fiat is good, then KDK is certainly wrecked, because every single time KDK is just going to read a utopian alternative. Now there was nothing else that was actually explained coming out of the 1AR, which means you can vote on the TDA switch side debate solving all of their offense or any of the presumption stuff above, because they've not given you a reason as to why they can spill out of debate. Their only thing, like, they have no offense. All they have is you didn't read it in front of to clash. Yes, they did. Oh.
Cool. When there's a.
Hasty. The United States relies on political policy recognition by incorporating data into legal jurisdiction, providing them with political rights and entrenching its relationship with journalism, with the benevolent seller and state data entrenched in genocide. Drop the uniqueness from the letting for evidence, letting ontology claim simply zeros the authenticity because it's a unique person that's your greater balance. Colonialism is high and structural right now. All their policies is entrenched colonialism causes bonds out there, which means the only permit to break from there. It's units for underpin your balance, because voting for Republican requires you to ignore the bonds out there, which is actually bound. Thus, we affirm refusal recognition that opens the space for autonomous nodes and create a new movement outside of the confines. But let's say the balance solves our offense because they drop the head of seven. That's the repetition of seller ideology, refuse seller subject. For example, in debate when everyone reads a policy plan, topical plan, refuse confront seller colonialism. So we just need the seller colonialism stays intact. The reason why it also takes out ISIS, which the communication of the 1 year, which was not a new argument because it proves the reading of plan, defending the state itself is bad, which is the risk evidence about how using the state itself as money itself retrenches seller colonialism because it assumes that the state has a journalistic tradition to decide where data should be. This forms of ideology is what you reject because the return self violence and only a valid disrupt this by break from this, which solves their model, Now the only thing that defense that you sent in the two R was that the echo chamber evidence about no best document is exactly what we advocate for. I'll read a line for you to you for the 2R. It says that without being open in contestation, they cannot solve for any of their offense. Exactly, this is what we advocate for a negative debate, which our model resolves because it tested at liberatory strategy. They're not colonialists, but their model means that they cannot be opened up to the contestation of colonialism, of whether they ideology are colonial, which in turn, which is a reason why Henderson is good. Now the ballot, the quote ballot only has symbolic value. So yes, to affirm the affirmative because it achieves a model that is not colonial. Yeah. The Harker power. Going from negative debate, it solves all their offense and interpret counter negative must rejoin the affirmative, solves all of our offense about topic being bad and how predictability is bad, but it also solves their offense. One, fairness, every debate has a resolution. And the status quo, which the 2R internal to limits and unpredictable have solves ground. You have to negate the resolution. So the negative will always have the core ground of affirming resolution as a rejoinder. Also can see that you have to prep negative position on your app. Anyways, our model doesn't expose the negative to any content that would have to prep on your model. 2, clash allows for more of it. Their model over limits debate to the exact text of resolution, whereas R allows to keep it negated anyway. Remember, the 1 and C have a much larger variety of positions than 1 and C, which proves that allowing apps to negate expect possibility of content of debate, not the negative policy, case, etc. Now, feeling like capital side relevant because arguments that capital side and not the actions that we have to take agreement that links our office. No, we will go impact our predictability because it's one of 3 about this all defense of the affirmative wrong, negative affirmative. The affirmative now CVA is wrong because IR is bad, which can see the argument about how the state is always structure antagonistic to native people, which is a drop argument. Now, the last argument to go for about the predictability case is that it looks our definition, but we don't include our definition, the only legal definition, but it turns our definition because predictability case offense for our kind of model their idea the Western legal definition are what determines topics should look like. This is about indigenous etymology, like for example storytelling, spiritual tradition, is how which rather than product it is video. To drop access that way because of true goods and terms classification, you must include the histology in the first place. Okay.
Great.